We're in the Sermon on the Mount, and there's no other passage and no other document that calls us to the heart of the matter. What is the heart of the matter? And as Philip touched on in his prayer, we sometimes detour from true north, do we not? And Jesus calls us back to the heart of the matter in this book, to our true north. I hope you did your homework this week, our homework for our visitors, and since you're here, this is an assignment for you too. So read the Sermon on the Mount out loud to yourself or to a partner, somebody, this week. And we've asked people to do that every week. I hope you're reading Nathan's articles in the bulletin, and the one this week is so timely, not only in the current situation in America, politically, culturally, and all of that, but also it has application to the Sermon on the Mount. And it talks about a person that a poet wrote about Rome and how their society had degenerated. They had wealth, they had stability, they had everything they need. Life was good, prosperous. But all they cared about was bread and circuses, entertainment, food and entertainment. And very good article, and it's timely in terms of the Sermon on the Mount. We finished up with the section where Christ said, "What is true righteousness?" And then I'm here to fulfill the law. And we talked about the fulfillment of the law. And then he gives 6 case studies. Anger, lust, divorce, truth-telling, revenge, and loving our enemies. And he wants us to see 6 examples of case studies where how does true righteousness, what is the heart of the matter on each of these real life situations? And we had begun the comments and the study on divorce. Last week, Carol was sick. She had a lot of the stuff that a lot of people have had, rarely misses, but she wasn't here. I come early on Sunday morning, and it was dark, and I turned the garage door opener and was going through the garage, but it was dark, and I really wasn't paying attention, and I hit my head, and I had a little scratch and a bruise on my head. And after class, Chad Hargett, they're traveling this week, but he said, "Hey, I need to talk to you." He said, "I appreciate your class." He said, but Carol's not here, and you got a bump on your head, bruise, and your class was about divorce. And is there something I need to know? So, but I just want to assure everybody everything's okay. So, but divorce is one of those case studies that Jesus gives us. And he wants to point to the heart of the matter. And if you'll remember in our discussion, there was a great debate, what is the sole reason from divorce? And he goes back to Deuteronomy and the people in their memory. Is it some great offense? Is it something that's unseemly? Is a reason for divorce something indecent? Or is it just for any reason? And so here's kind of the conversation as we finish up this case study. The religious leaders come to him, and the people say, is it lawful to divorce for any reason at all? And when you're looking at this passage, we need to combine it with his teaching in Matthew 19 as well and kind of make a big picture. But here's kind of the conversation. Is it lawful to divorce for just any reason at all? And Jesus' reply is, I don't want to talk about exceptions. I want to talk about what was God's intention for marriage from the beginning, from Genesis, what God's joined together. come back, the conversation is, well, may a man divorce his wife for any matter of indecency? And in the context, the key word there is man. May a man divorce his wife just for any matter of anything. Jesus said, wait a minute, you can't get rid of her so quickly. The concession that they were looking for left women vulnerable, marginalized, the kids. The point is, Jesus is reprogramming their thoughts and our thoughts of thinking into an actual way of living. And I think it's really important to say here, in all of these case studies, in the context of the case studies, what's the heart of the matter? When Jesus says, don't be angry, don't lust, what's God's plan for men and women? What's God's plan for telling the truth, for vengeance, for loving our enemies? Every one of those, we have to ask ourselves, is there forgiveness from God? When I'm angry and I lose my temper and I say and do things that are not pleasing to God, is there forgiveness from God for that? Absolutely. When my mind goes where it should not go, and I look and I lust and I go places or maybe do things that I should not do, is there forgiveness? And of course there is. And I think we have to realize that in the context of all of these, every one of these case studies, divorce is going to happen. Is there forgiveness? Is there grace? And that's the lens I think that God wants us to, that Jesus is wanting us to look at when we say, here's the heart of the matter. Are there consequences? Are there results of all of these things when we, in our humanness, in our sinfulness, miss true north? Absolutely. But Jesus says there's forgiveness, there's grace in all of these case studies. He's just trying to reprogram our way of thinking. Oaths. And you've heard it said, this is verse 33. Again, you've heard it said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you've sworn. But I say to you, don't take an oath at all, either by heaven or by the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Don't take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair black or white. Let what you say be simply yes or no, and anything more than this comes from evil. Again, what's the heart of the matter? And the word oath, literally truth-telling, and it's not a vow. We see examples, somebody made a vow to God. This isn't a vow. We look at many, many illustrations of oaths. Herodias danced in front of Herod, and so he made an oath, and he said that you can have up to, it was pleasing to him and the crowd. He promised her half the kingdom, and then he thought about it, but he had made an oath, and in front of everybody. Peter made an oath, remember, when he denied Christ, and he hadn't seen Jesus. He wasn't with that crowd, and so there's all kinds of oaths, and it's interesting. Jesus used an oath himself, did he not? If you'll remember, at his trial, the high priest said, I adjure you. In other words, I'm telling you under oath, you need to answer me what I'm saying. And Jesus said, it is true. So I don't think it's a matter of, I know in the old days people used to say, could a Christian go to court and take an oath? And And there was a discussion about, was that good or was that bad, or could they do that? In the context here of greater righteousness, in the context of the heart of the matter, what was on their mind was Leviticus 19. Don't swear by my name falsely and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. But the problem was, I know I'm not supposed to swear an oath on God. But if I swear an oath on the temple or on a tree or on Jerusalem or on something else, why do I do that? Why would I want to do that? Why would a person want to do that? I know I can't swear an oath on God, but why would I want to swear maybe on something, this pew or this building or something? As a human, why would I want to do that? Gives me a little wiggle room, doesn't it? In case it doesn't work out. I didn't swear on God. I swore on something lesser. You see, the oath is something on, and it kind of gave me an excuse or an out. I think that's what Jesus is addressing. And the point he's trying to make is, the heart of the matter is, we need to seek, as people of God, we need to seek the sincerity that comes from the heart of God. And we need to be known as people, if our yes is yes, our no is no, people of our word. We promise, we make promises, we keep the promises we make, we keep the commitments we make, we do the things we say we will do, we don't do the things we said we wouldn't do. Yes. And contrast that to a politician, a stereotypical politician, and they're going to say one thing to this group because it fits what this group would want to hear, so I can vote, they can vote for me, and then maybe something different for this group, something maybe even contradictory to this group, but then we hear the expression, so-and-so was on the news, they said this, but then they walked it back. We hear that expression now. Or they nuanced what they said. God's saying, be people of character. Have sincerity, whether it's a legal matter, whether we're in a courtroom, whether we're in a relationship, whether it's somebody on the street. And this is not... This is not new information. Jesus is reminding us this was what the righteousness was supposed to be. So he brings up Zechariah. These are the things you should do. Speak truth to one another. Render in the gates judgments that are true. Make for peace. Don't devise evil. Love no false oath. These are things I hate, declares the Lord. So this is not Jesus with a new information or a new standard. This was always there. But it was adjusted in order for people to get around an oath to God. I can say this, but I kind of nuanced it. Very political. It's always been that way. Anything more than this comes from evil. Jesus reminds us that there's not an intermediate, there's no power. Ultimately, he is the power, and we derive our heart, we derive our holiness, our desire to be holiness. Anything sacred comes from that, and God is truth, and so anything that's reeks of untruth flies in the face of God's holiness, and that's what he's trying to remind them there. Hebrews 6. When God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no one greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself. So God ultimately made a promise, and he made an oath here in Hebrews 6. Surely I'll bless and multiply you. And thus Abraham patiently waited, obtained that promise. For people swear by something greater than themselves, and in all their dispute, an oath is final for confirmation. But when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath. So that by two unchangeable things, God's promise and his oath, it's impossible for God to lie. We who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set for us. We have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters the place. That's the standard that Jesus wants from our hearts. Are we going to be perfect as humans? Of course not, as God was. But that's where he's calling us to be in our truth-telling, in our heart, in our integrity. And in our integrity, Jesus wants us to be countercultural, different than the world around us. That's part of that being salt and light. These are people that if they say yes, they'll do it. If they say no, these are people of integrity. The world around us is not. I remember the old days, they would talk about people that would, didn't need a contract. You didn't need to sign anything because you just shook hands. It was a handshake deal. When we lived in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, a big Amish community, just in Etheridge, just north of Lawrenceburg, they didn't want to do contracts. My word is my word. And it was. Literally. And they would try to, Carol was working for the city at the time, and they would try to do a land transaction. And, paperwork's involved, but they didn't want to do that. We paid money, and he sold it, and they shook hands. And that's the integrity that God is calling us. That's the heart of the matter. That's what he wants our integrity to be. 538. You've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, don't resist the one who's evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go a mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you. Don't refuse the one who would borrow from you. Here's the heart of the matter is really grace. It's not retaliation. It's not revenge. And Jesus quotes from actually 3 places, Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. And like the other 5 case studies, like all 5 of them, people were prone, and we are prone, to want to keep the letter of the law and kind of miss the heart of the law. In other words, we took a principle, and they took a principle that really wasn't meant to apply to them in the first place and made it an individual. An eye for an eye. What was the principle behind an eye for an eye? Max, you're the lawyer in the room. Where should an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth have been? In a judicial setting, right? Like punishment, restitution in a legal sense. It was never meant to say, he insulted me, and so on a personal level, eye for an eye. It was never meant to be that. It was always in the old law a judicial sense. But alas, they had viewed it in terms of, well, he did something to me, so I need to do something to him. What's the heart of the matter? What's God's heart? Well, here's a little illustration that he gives. It's got, can you hardly see that? Can you see that? I can hardly read it. But he gives 4 little examples. And the action is somebody slaps you. What's justice? What's the right thing to do? Slap them back, right? If I was somebody that just gave in, I wouldn't do anything. But Jesus doesn't say just don't give in. He actually says, give them the other cheek. This is a whole greater righteousness. Someone wants your shirt. The just thing is, no, you can't have my shirt. I'm going to fight for my shirt. If I were just to give in, I would let them have it. Grace says, okay, give them your coat also. This is a whole new standard of living, a whole new in terms of our lives. A soldier comes and says, carry my gear. I don't want to carry your gear. That'd be the right thing to say because you're just a citizen, right? Okay, I give in. I'll go the required mile. Jesus says, go. Hey, I'm at the end of the mile. You want to go another mile? How crazy is that? That's grace. I want your stuff. You can't have my stuff. I'm keeping my stuff. Okay, you can have it. I'm not going to try to get it back. That's grace. And that's what Jesus is talking about in terms of extending grace to people and not justice. It's not eye for an eye and tooth for tooth. We're extending grace. And look what Paul says. And this idea about vengeance. I know people personally who get so bent out of shape about things in the world, politically, culturally, and they're just angry. And first of all, it's things you can't control personally, but God is the ultimate. Look what Paul says, repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to what is honorable in the sight of all. See, this is so countercultural, right? If possible, as far as depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourself, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink, for in doing so, you'll heap burning coals on his head. Don't be overcome by evil. Overcome evil with good. Peter says it this way, you've been called because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example you might follow. He committed no sin, no deceit was found in his mouth. When he was reviled, did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to the one who judges justly. The one who judges justly. And so, you remember Moses we talked about blessed are the meek, for they'll inherit the land. And Moses was the most meek of all. And he was meek because in that situation where his authority was threatened, and he could, by human rights, say, I'm the leader, I told you to do this. He just sat back and let God. He knew God would take care of the situation. And that's what meekness was. And that's what God is calling us, or Jesus is calling us to do here in the heart of the matter. So it's not being weak in the giving in, but it's being powerful in grace. And we think of that humanly, like that grace, you're just being a kind of a wimp or a pansy, you're just being a pushover. Gandhi says, a nonviolent response requires a far stronger person than a violent response. Isn't that true? Isn't that consistent with what Jesus has said? It took a meek Moses to stand there and listen to Miriam and all of that, and just, you can kind of see him shrugging his shoulders, and God's going to take care of that. That takes a much stronger person than to want to fight everybody and answer everybody and give some strongly worded Facebook responses and memes, and I'm going to show them, and all of that. Grace is much more powerful and stronger and harder to do than the human. than living in the human kingdom, the kingdom of heaven. But that's what God is calling us to do with the heart of the matter. And isn't our goal ultimately to win other people to Christ? It isn't just to be nice people. Ultimately, we want to win our neighbors, our friends, the people we come in contact, the who is my neighbor people. We want to win them to Christ. And so we don't resist. We don't strike back. We don't retaliate. We don't get what's mine. We don't get what I deserve. We offer grace. We offer grace. And that leads kind of naturally to the last case study. As we're looking at the heart of the matter, loving your enemies. You've heard it said, love your enemy and love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes the sun rise on the evil and the good, sends rain on the just and the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brethren, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? You must therefore be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. First of all, you've heard it said, you will love your neighbor. Where does it say in the old law, hate your enemy? Where did it say that? It didn't. See, they had formed that. Now, there were countless illustrations where to destroy the Amalekites, and all of those, but never is there an admonition to hate our enemy. Never did they have that. But they had turned that to say, you've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Well, that was never there. All of these case studies, particularly anger, lust, retaliation, loving our enemies, you remember we talked about a continuum, and it's a line of contempt. And so with anger, the line began with name calling. Call them a fool. Call them a moron, call them stupid, call them idiots. And that becomes, that name calling becomes contempt, and it becomes anger, which leads to hate, which leads to murder. And that's why John says, if you hate your brother, what are you? If you hate your brother, what are you? A murderer. That's how he can say that, because it's all on the continuum of contempt. Lust was the same way. We look, we think, the action begins, it grows, ends in an action. These things are on a continuum. And loving the enemies is one that is the same thing on that same. And I want us to look at kind of stick with me for a minute on this, because loving our enemies is on a continuum. And so there's an amazing book, and it's called Why Not Kill Them All? And it talks about conditions that lead from persecution to genocide. And we would look at this group in this room, and they would say, I could never be guilty of genocide. That's evil historical characters, Mao Zedong and Hitler and Mussolini and Stalin, and we could never be there. And the book deals with all kinds of persecution and so on, whether it's political, whether it's ethnic, whether it's racial, cultural, whatever it is. But why do people persecute people? And how does it get to that point? And the book is fascinating, but it's so consistent with what Jesus talks about in a continuum of contempt. And people say, I could never go there. This guy's the nicest guy in the world. He could never go there. But look at this. It's all on the continuum. And how that works is this. First, and as we've looked at the Sermon on the Mount so far, we look at people collectively and not individually. We should look at, as believers, we should look at people uniquely. They're created in the image of God just as I. No different. But when we begin to look at people collectively, that starts the process. That's on the continuum here, right? And so it's easy to say, all black people are fill in the blank. All white people are fill in the blank. All Republicans are blank. All Democrats are blank. All Hispanics are blank. Fill in the pejorative term, right? When we start looking at people collectively instead of individually as individually created image bearers of God. Because then we look at people less than fully human, right? How many years did it take in America, Max, the lawyer? This is from your law class. So, how many years was it before a black person was fully human? You know, there was the whole progress. It was half. It was 3/5. You know, it took time.
So during the Civil War, after the Civil War, 1864, 1865.
Yeah. So there's that thing that they're less than human, right? And that's just one example. And racism is a worldwide, I mean, it's a human condition. It's not just black and white. The point is we look at people collectively, not individually. But then when that happens, it's easy to draw a line that separates us from them. We're here, they're there, okay? And that could be on any basis, religion, nationality, whatever. And then we essentialize people based on that difference. And what that means in the book, it isn't just facts about them. That's who they are. Those people from Colorado, I'm telling you, over here, let me tell you about people from Colorado. And that becomes a serious issue. Then we decide that the difference between us and them is bad. This is where hatred begins. Again, we're on the continuum that Jesus has talked about, right? Hatred, murder is the same as calling somebody a moron, isn't it? It is. So we decided they're evil. And now, once that has happened, really, once you're fundamentally bad, once those people from Colorado are fundamentally bad, now the gloves are off, right? Now I can say and justify anything because, and all along, look at this, we're not saying, or the point of the book is that how do normal, average, ordinary people become somebody that persecutes somebody else or later becomes a leader and leads a movement in genocide or persecution or so on. So add enough fear and now we feel like that we need to take action against these people. We don't like those people from Colorado. They're fill in the blank names. They've always been that way. They are evil. Now it's justified. We're going to do something to you, whatever the action is. Not a good action. Because now you're a threat, right? Now you're a threat to me and your existence threatens me. And this can work from both directions. From people that see Christianity in this way. So for instance, if you're in China, you see Christians as people that threaten the system, threaten the leaders. It's not part of the control mechanism of communism. So that is obviously a threat to the system. Could be anywhere that Christianity exists. We believe that, and we know Jesus. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No other name is there in salvation under heaven and earth than the name of Jesus. And when we profess that, there's places in the world that starts this process against us, right? Against Christians. But for applications for the heart of the matter, I want us to see it in terms of how could I, as a wonderful, sweet, kind, ordinary, just good guy, how could I get to that point? And it's not hard. It is not that hard. It is on that continuum. And that's what's amazing about this book. Finally, we have power. We've seen these people not as an individual, but as a group. They're bad. So it's not always the state that's persecuting people sometimes. And here's the point in loving your enemies. The Sermon on the Mount, Jesus calls us back. He calls us back from power. Blessed are the meek, they'll inherit the land. He calls us back from fear. Chapter 6 is going to talk about where's our heart, where's our treasure, where's our trust. And if our trust is in God, or is it in something else? Is it in money, possessions, houses, land, all of that? Calls us back from hatred. To return evil for good is devilish. To return good for good is human. To return good for evil is divine. So that was just a striking illustration to me of really, we say we could never hate a group of people. You know, we could never hate or not this, you know, we could never do that. We're good Christians. It's a slippery slope. It really, really is. And it's not that far from here to there to here to here. And that's how it happens. Jesus says it's the heart of the matter. And that's why all through here, he's calling us back to true north. Hey, here's the continuum. You're here, you got to here. Let's get back. That's what Jesus is doing on the Sermon on the Mount. Be perfect. How are we to be perfect? How can that even be? Be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. How can that be? I'm sorry? That's the foundation. That's the beginning, for sure. Well, it can't be perfection in actions, can it? Because otherwise I failed a long time ago. It can't be perfection in knowledge. I'm not the smartest guy in any room I go in. So it's got to be something else. So that'll be your homework for next week. Read Matthew 5, 6, and 7 and see what it means when Jesus says, let's be perfect. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your attention. And let's have a good worship here in just a few moments. Thank you.